This is a drag strip. There are over 400 such strips in the United States. More than 5 million people follow drag racing, and there are 200,000 cars and drivers that currently compete in drag racing meets across the country. 1,320 feet, a quarter of a mile. If you were driving down this strip of pavement in your family sedan at 60 miles an hour, it would take you 15 seconds to cover the distance. If you began from a standing start at the beginning of the quarter mile, it would take you longer. This man is a drag racer. His great enthusiasm in life is reducing that length of time. He is one of thousands of people whose hobby, in many cases whose single goal, is to go from a standing start to the finish line 1,320 feet away faster than anyone else can. This is drag racing. Imagine you are in your family sedan, again, holding a steady 60 miles an hour. You pass one of these cars waiting at the starting line, and you hold your steady 60. If the driver of the dragster started as you passed, he would pass you in little more than 800 feet. In fact, if you were holding a steady 120 miles an hour, he would still catch you within the quarter mile. And he'd be doing close to 200 miles an hour when he did. That is acceleration. Drag racing is a peculiarly American sport, American in origin and American in development. But this is a British crowd, and some of the cars are British. Drag racing is now going international. Recognition has recently been granted the sport by the International Automobile Federation, or FIA. And this is the first British International Drag Racing Festival held in the late summer of 1964. The event was a huge success, and we'll cover it in detail and get British reaction to the sport. But let's go back to the point of origin and get some American background first. We're at Pomona, California for the 1964 NHRA Winter Nationals, one of two main annual events in drag racing in the United States. 75,000 spectators are here and 500 competitors from all over the United States and Canada. All the top names in drag racing are here, plus a lot of novices who want to take a crack at the champions. Amateurs compete against professionals in drag racing, and the man with the best equipment, the most skill, and sometimes the most luck, wins. He isn't necessarily always from the ranks of the established champions. Nevertheless, there are established favorites whose past performances have caused them to be expected to win. Men like Len Richter, with his Ford Fairlane Thunderbolt, powered by a 427 cubic inch high riser Ford engine, in the super stock class for cars with stick shift. Or 68-year-old Sam Perio of the City of Industry, California, one of the grand old men of drag racing, with his Ford-powered Curtis and A modified sports car. Billy Cox is here, competing in Class A stock automatic. Later in the year, he'll switch to factory experimental cars and continue to be a big threat. And Gas Ronda is here to compete on his way to becoming World Point champion in stock cars in 1964. All the hoopla and ballyhoo of a state fair is in the air, plus all the excitement of motorsports. Miss Hurst Floorshift of the Hurst Performance Products Company graces a float in the infield. Drag racing is essentially a simple sport, driving in a straight line from a standing start for a quarter of a mile. When you're sitting behind 1,400 horsepower, nestled in a 1,300-pound car, just going straight becomes a very busy pastime. In the faster unlimited classes, anything goes as long as safety precautions are followed, including twin engines and even an occasional four-engine job. Here an engine explodes when the driver over-revs on the starting line. Accidents do happen in the highly stressed cars, but the rules are devised to avert turning this kind of misadventure into tragedy. And it is a tribute to the sports organizing bodies that drag racing has a better safety record than any other kind of motor racing. Even though the cars are so fast in the dragster classes that parachutes are used to help stop them. Now we're in the staging area where the cars get in line for their runs. Ronnie Socks moves up to the line. The cars are started by the Christmas tree, an anticipated start system that tells the driver when he can go and automatically disqualifies him if he starts too early. The green light starts the clock, and an electric I-beam stops it, so elapsed time can be measured to the thousandth of a second. While a flashing arrow points to the winner's lane, so the crowd at the starting line and in the stands can tell who wins the close ones. The cars are divided roughly into stock cars, sports cars, factory experimental cars, coupes and sedans, roadsters, and the out-and-out dragsters, sometimes called slingshots or rails. Special classes are set up for cars that are modified from stock mechanically, that have modified bodywork or are homemade. In addition, cars are divided by whether they run on gasoline or exotic nitrate-based fuels. And further division is made on the basis of pounds per cubic inch displacement. So classification gets complicated. There are currently 74 divisions and classes of cars competing in the United States. Let's take a ride with Len Richter in his Thunderbolt. Watch Len go through the gears. The car competes in the top stock eliminator division and can usually be depended upon to cover the standing quarter mile in just under 11 seconds. The dragsters go even faster. With direct drive, there's usually no gear shifting. Here's a driver's eye view of the quarter-mile drag strip, covered in about 8 to 9 seconds, filmed from an actual run. And to give you an idea how fast the car accelerates, let's look back over the driver's shoulder as he blasts away from the starting line. These AA fuel dragsters are producing on the order of 1,400 horsepower, and managing one of them under full throttle is no job for the faint of heart. The other premier event in American drag racing is the Nationals, held at Indianapolis Raceway Park, Indiana. In 1964, this event drew more spectators and entrants than Pomona, with 123,000 fans watching 1,250 cars compete over the 5-day event. Indianapolis in the summertime is a picnic-like setting, and thousands of Americans at their leisure came to watch the fun. But while a drag race can seem like a social event, the real stars are the cars themselves. Every unusual and ingenious concoction of American backyard engineering seems to be here. Meticulously prepared, often on shoestring budgets, designed only after exhaustive examination of the regulations, and usually after at least a couple of years of hard-earned experience at the drag strips are accumulated. The cars take all shapes and sizes, but are aimed finally at a single goal: acceleration. The most acceleration that it is possible to achieve within the framework of the division or class in which the car runs. The goals of a drag racing builder are as single-minded as the sport itself. and the means to reach those goals are exceedingly complex. In general, the principle is to get as much power as possible to the wheels, maximum traction between the wheels and pavement, and as little superfluous weight as possible for the power to move. Thus, the builder soups his engine as much as he can within the regulations for his class. He moves everything as far back as he can to put more weight on the rear wheels for traction. And he fits the largest tires permitted at the rear to get more rubber on the ground. No starter is carried on the out-and-out dragsters. The extra weight isn't worth it in a car that is hardly going to be used for shopping. That's why you see so many of these cars being push-started. As it happens, these cars seldom travel under their own power at all, except when actually racing. Radiators aren't usually carried either. In a 10-second run, cooling isn't very important. In fact, if you realize that a dragster is seldom running except at full throttle and in as straight a line as possible, you can readily see that a lot of life's little amenities can be left off. Despite the sometimes backyard nature of some of the cars, they represent the very highest sort of engineering within their limited goals. Engine tuning techniques, for example, are as highly developed among American drag racers as anywhere in the world. In every sense of the word, the drag racers are carrying on their own basic research. But research is a two-way street. Here, technical representatives of the Autolite division of Ford Motor Company consult with car owners, including Jack Chrisman of the well-known Saxon Son 427 Comet. Many major automotive manufacturers cooperate with organized drag racing as another research tool to supplement their own development and testing work. This experience gained at the racetrack will eventually filter its way into the products on the road. All cars must undergo an intensive technical and safety inspection for possible flaws that could eventually prove hazardous. At the same time, the cars are classified. It's a family sport. This husband and wife team won the award at Indianapolis for the best appearing car at the meet, thanks in part to her efforts. Tension begins to build. Everything is checked 100 times, then once more. Critical tire pressures, which have to be just right to get the maximum traction, are checked. The cars are moved slowly to the staging area, preparatory to making their initial runs. The drivers begin getting ready. Time trials are run to assist the drivers in getting the feel of the track surface that they will be working with and to aid last-minute tuning. Variations in temperature and humidity can mean a difference of hundredths of a second, so some changes have to be made for every race. And the tension continues to build. The drivers of the big exotic fuel dragsters don their flame-proof suits and masks, an extra precaution against accidents like the one we saw earlier that could envelop them in flames. Here, Connie Kalitta, one of the most successful of the dragster drivers, prepares for a run. But mostly everyone just waits. Then come time trials, practice runs, and the actual elimination runs. Trophies are awarded for the fastest elapsed times, fastest trap speeds, and top eliminators. Drivers who have been successful in more of the head-to-head confrontations with other drivers in their class, but who haven't necessarily posted lowest times or fastest speed. Here we see an older model gas class coupe running a time trial simultaneously with George Montgomery's very successful Class A supercharged coupe, which uses a 34-coupe body with a 402 cubic inch V8 engine. Supercharging is used to increase the power tremendously. Accordingly, cars with superchargers are raised to the next higher class than their engine size would ordinarily put them in. Almost all of the big unlimited dragsters are supercharged. The Indian directing traffic is Bob Beezer from Canada. A full-blooded Deseronto, he is brought to every major drag meeting in the United States by the National Hot Rod Association, not only to add color to the proceedings, but because a drag meeting has never been rained out while he was in attendance. He calls to the line the Bob Ford 427 Mustang, driven by Ken Salter. Mustang wins. The time trials and elimination runs go on. Everyone runs. For trophies, for cash, and for awards in equipment that consist of everything from wrenches and spark plugs to complete cars. But let's go back to England and see how the tight little islands respond to this heretofore American sport. The British turn out in droves for England's first real taste of American drag racing. Similar events here in the past have been referred to as sprints, or simply acceleration trials, but they've been pretty well restricted to English machines. So this is the first glimpse for the British of such single-purpose machines as this dragster owned by Doug Church from Long Beach, California, or Tony Nancy's Wedge 2. The scene in the pits is almost precisely the same as it would be for an American meet, although the dress and the accents are different. Here, Don Garlitz, the big daddy of American drag racing, repacks his parachute in preparation for an all-out run in his Windjammer. Don is the first person to consistently break 200 miles per hour in the quarter mile. If the English think the American cars are strange looking, the corresponding reaction must be recorded on the part of the American team. The English, liking the duty-free manufacturing sources of drag racing equipment and parts presently manufactured primarily in the United States, tend to race more different kinds of vehicles than even the Americans do. Former Grand Prix cars, go-karts, motorcycles, even a 1914 French Métallique appear in the pits. Motorcycles in particular are very popular, and when adapted for drag racing, provide wild and exciting action. This determined Englishman brings his machine to the line and gets off to a fine run. Wonder how many trips to the quarter mile he gets to a pair of shoes. American Bill Wood, on his modified Harley-Davidson, demonstrates his machine for the British. Although the English racing fans have had considerable experience with acceleration trials, they certainly had never seen anything like the all-out dragsters of Tony Nancy and Tommy Ivo. Nancy's Wedge 2, with rear engine and full streamlining, is one of the most technically advanced cars in the business, and the Britishers were quite impressed by its outstanding performance. Popular Tommy Ivo, the American TV personality, was also a great favorite. Here he does a wheel stand. The tremendous power of the car actually lifting the front wheels off the ground at the start on the way to another impressive run. To give the English version of such activities, Sidney Allard's Ford Cortina-powered Dragons were demonstrated. Here, motoring journalist Dennis Jenkinson gives the supercharged 1.6-liter or 91 cubic inch dragster a try. Alan Allard, son of the famous racing car designer, takes his Dragon to a remarkable quarter-mile time of 11.11 seconds with a trap speed of 129 miles per hour. Bad for an engine less than a fourth the size of the big American dragsters. And so drag racing goes international. The impact of these meetings will be felt throughout the coming years, and it is hoped that the exchange of teams will continue in the future. Certainly the English got a look at some interesting machinery, and so did the Americans for that matter. You can depend on one thing. The equipment prepared for similar future meetings will be every bit as interesting and spectacular. In meeting the challenge of that short quarter mile, anything, absolutely anything, goes. drag racing, success comes from constant practice, constant testing, and constant endeavor to find a way to fare hundredths, even thousandths of a second off elapsed time. The men who are dedicated to this sport are professionals who are completely in earnest, completely serious, and highly safety conscious. They work hard in search of perfection, in search of an ever faster quarter mile, a mere 1,320 feet.